this video training series, I'm going to talk about Ayurvedic nutrition and cooking in a way that is easy to understand, easy to implement in your life, and easy to get started straight away. Sound good? So tell me if this is you. You have tried lots of different dietary approaches in the past and approaches to being healthy. Some of them have worked, but none of them have been sustainable. You've been searching and searching for something that really suits you, that answers all of your questions and just makes sense and feels right. Now, you've heard about Ayurveda, maybe through a friend or your yoga teacher, or you've just come across it through a magazine, and you've started to do a little bit of reading. And as you're learning more and more about it, you're starting to think, hey, I think this makes a hell of a lot of sense. And it's actually starting to answer some of my questions that all these other things I've tried haven't been able to answer. I've done a little bit of cooking, the meals feel pretty good. I've always really enjoyed curries and Indian food and that sort of thing. So maybe this could be for me. But as you've started to read more and more about it and delve in a little bit deeper, you've realized that this is actually quite a vast science and might be a little bit confusing, and you're not entirely sure where to go from here. You're looking for a little bit of help, you're looking for some support, you're looking for a way into this science that makes sense and in a way that you can apply it in your daily life without getting thoroughly confused. If this is you, you're in the right place. You may also find that through your trying lots of different diets, you may be suffering from symptoms of indigestion when you eat. You might have burping, bloating, gas, flatulence, you might have reflux or heartburn, or you might just suffer from heaviness and lethargy and feel like after you eat, your meal kind of sits in your stomach like a brick for hours and hours and you don't have a great appetite. You might find that your eliminations aren't everything you'd like them to be. They may be a little bit too loose, or they may be a little bit too dry, or they may be a little bit somewhere in between. Or they might swing back and forth between the two. Either way, they're not super satisfying. So these are all symptoms of indigestion from a digestive fire that's kind of struggling from its history of either neglect or just not knowing how to care for it. You may also feel like your metabolism isn't quite what it used to be, that maybe when you were younger you found it much easier to just maintain a comfortable weight and not really have to think about it too much. But now that you've gotten a little bit older, things are getting a little bit more challenging. You may have some niggling health concerns, maybe some skin problems, or you feel like you've got some hormonal imbalances, or you're not sleeping very well, or you might be heading towards a change in life like perimenopause or menopause, and you're starting to notice some other symptoms that you'd really like to care for, and that's sort of led you on a journey into exploring different approaches. And again, you've come across Ayurveda. So if this is you, you are in the right place. This is exactly what this free video series is for, is to answer some of these questions and to give you an entry point into Ayurvedic cooking and nutrition. So now it's time to get into the juicy bit of the video, which is the actual fundamentals of Ayurveda. So we'll go through these concepts a little bit at a time, just step by step, one block at a time. We will add to the knowledge. But first and foremost, I want to reassure you that although there will be a couple of new Sanskrit words, which is the ancient language of India, kind of like the Latin of India, although there will be some Sanskrit words that I will introduce to you that you haven't heard before, I'll teach you how to pronounce them and you don't need to freak out. But the large majority of the language of Ayurveda, which is an elemental science, is words and concepts that you already understand intimately. Because Ayurveda is an elemental science, we're talking space, air, fire, water, earth. Sorry, I was looking up because my neighbour has just decided to start whippersnippering in this moment. So there might be a few little whippersnippers in the background, and I sincerely apologise for that. So, An elemental science, we're talking space, air, fire, water, earth. We're familiar with all of these elements, but we just haven't applied them to this kind of way of thinking about them before. So just keep that in mind. But how we break down the elements is in Ayurveda is we describe them as a collection of qualities. Now qualities are words, they're the first words we learn when we're young. We're talking hot, cold, light, heavy, smooth, rough, those sorts of things. All of the ways we describe our universe is through the qualities, and we already know all of these words. So that's how we describe the elements. That's how we describe the elements when they come together in the body. Everything. These are the building blocks. So you already know the language of Ayurveda. So let's begin with the Ayurvedic understanding of digestion, so this all makes sense. So in Ayurveda, we don't look at digestion as the same way that we do in Western nutrition. So of course in the West we look at the organs, we look at the chemical processes, and we look at each stage of the process, and it's incredibly complicated. It's so complicated that it's very difficult for us to know what actually goes on exactly when, say for example, we just eat a carrot. When we've got all of those chemical constituents of a carrot combining with all of the chemical constituents in an individual, and every individual is different, and every individual's digestion is slightly different, and everyone's microbiome is slightly different, and we're only just even remotely beginning to explore the world of gut biome, gut microbiome. Had a bit of trouble getting that out. In Ayurveda, it's much more simple. We look at our digestion as a digestive fire. And to care for our digestion, we are caring for our fire. So rather than looking out there and wondering, what do I need to eat that's healthy today or considered healthy from a scientific perspective today, but might not be considered healthy from a scientific perspective tomorrow, we look inward. We look to our belly. We feel into our belly. How does it feel in this moment? What do I need to eat right now to care for my digestive fire? So that's the real difference when it comes to Ayurvedic nutrition. In Ayurveda, our digestive fire is known as Agni, or more specifically, it's known as Jathara Agni, which means central digestive fire. Now, this digestive fire can have three different states of balance or imbalance. We have balanced digestive fire, then three states of imbalance, which are a fire that is too sharp or too hot, a fire that is too dull, or a fire that is variable. So what does balanced digestion look like? Let's look at that first. What does balanced Agni look like first? It's when our appetite is good at every meal. So we wake up in the morning, we have a good appetite, we're ready for breakfast. Come lunchtime, around 12:30 to 2 o'clock, we have a good appetite, we're ready for lunch. And same for dinner, around 6 o'clock we have a good appetite and we're ready for dinner. And it means that when we do eat, we're digesting our food well, so that by the time the next meal comes around, the contents of our stomach are empty, our food has been completely digested, and we're ready for the next meal. If we find that our appetite isn't like that, then it's usually because we're not digesting things properly and we're not quite ready for the next meal yet. So that's balanced digestion. We'll also tend to have no symptoms of indigestion after eating. We won't have any flatulence or burping or bloating or pain or reflux or heartburn or heaviness or tiredness after eating. We'll feel quite light and energetic after eating. When was the last time you felt like that after having a meal? Light and energetic, rather than feeling like you needed to have a nap or undo your belt buckle or just put a hot water bottle on your belly to stop the pain. So balanced digestion, no symptoms of indigestion, and great appetite, good elimination, And generally we tend to have stronger immune system, we tend not to come down with colds that other people have, and all sorts of wonderful, amazing benefits that we'll talk about later. When our digestive fire is imbalanced, it can have three types of imbalance. It can be too hot, too sharp, it can be too dull, or it can be variable, where it swings between being too sharp, too hot, and too dull. So too sharp digestive fire, that's when the fire's really strong, and it means that we tend to have an insatiable appetite. We might have something to eat, half an hour later we've got the fridge door open, we're looking for more. We might have a massive meal, and then at the end of it we just don't feel satisfied at all and we're looking for more food. It means that our food tends to be overcooked and everything kind of turns into charcoal. And usually along with an insatiable appetite, we tend to suffer from hot indigestion. So that might come as reflux, burning sensations, or heartburn, where you get that hardcore pain kind of in the heart area, which is actually near the top of the stomach. So that's too sharp digestive fire. Next we have too dull digestive fire, which is when we tend to not have much appetite at all. We're not really very hungry at any meal, but we eat because we feel like we should, and when we do eat, whatever we've eaten kind of sits in our stomach and feels like a brick for hours afterwards, and we don't really feel like the next meal when it comes along. When we do eat also, we tend to feel very heavy and lethargic and sleepy. That's a very obvious sign of dull digestion. And then finally we have variable digestion, which tends to be like a candle blowing in the wind, and it's moving between that really sharp digestion and the really low one. So if you imagine a campfire on a windy day, you know that 1 minute it's flaring up and it's massive, and the next minute it's blowing out to almost nothing. That's what it's like. So we might either have a really strong appetite or no appetite at all. We might find that if we are particularly busy and stressed and agitated in the middle of doing something, then we'll tend towards having less of an appetite. And that's because that's like the wind blowing the mind is also blowing the digestive fire, and it tends to go out a little bit. And then suddenly when we're not busy and we've come home from the day, we realise, oh my God, I'm actually starving. And then we eat something, maybe a snack, maybe a heavy snack because we want to ground ourselves, so we have some cheese and crackers or a handful of nuts or something like that as we're making dinner, and then we find when dinner comes along we're actually not hungry anymore, because even just having that small snack has been so heavy on our precarious little digestive fire, it's been enough to put it out. So those are the three different types of imbalanced digestion, and next we're going to talk about what happens when we're in those states of indigestion. So when we have any one of these imbalanced digestive fires or imbalanced Agni, our food isn't cooked properly. It basically isn't digested properly, and we are left with undigested food wastes. So when the digestive fire is too sharp, it overcooks the food. You can think of when you have your stove up too high and you're trying to cook rice. If you have it up too high, it's going to burn the rice. Some will be completely raw, while other bits will be completely burnt to charcoal. If the stove is too low or too dull, then again the rice is going to get really stodgy and skludgy. I'm trying to get my words out there, failing miserably, and it's not going to cook properly. You need to have the heat at just the right level for the rice to cook properly. Rice is a bad example just then, because actually rice cooks really well on a really low heat if you're doing the absorption method, but anyway, details, you get the drift. If you have any of those three imbalanced states of digestion, too high, too low, and variable, your food isn't going to cook properly in your stomach, and as a result you have undigested food toxins that accumulate and they move throughout the digestive tract. So the undigested food toxins in Ayurveda, we call them ama, A-M-A, but with a long A, ama. And ama is described as a thick, heavy, sticky, gloopy substance. Again, I think I just made up a word. Thick, heavy, mucus-like substance. So it's very sticky. That accumulates in the digestive tract, and it sticks to the walls of the digestive tract. As a result, it can clog up some of those little sphincters or holes that are absolutely necessary for the chemicals of digestion to be secreted through. So it might hamper, say, the secretion of our digestive enzymes or digestive juices. It can accumulate in the little pockets of the digestive tract where we have the villi and microvilli for increased absorption in the digestive tract. And when it's there, it can sort of ferment and become really gooey, like an anaerobic compost heap. And as a result, it can really encourage bad bacteria in our gut biome and discourage good bacteria in the gut biome, which we all hear a lot about these days, of how important the gut biome is. And Armour can really wreak havoc with it. It can turn it from a lovely, light, beautifully smelling aerobic compost heap to a sticky, yucky, stinky, wet, fermented compost heap. And it's very unpleasant. It also, after it causes fermentation, it can cause inflammation of the gut wall. And once it causes inflammation of the gut wall, it can cause damage to the gut wall, and as a result, larger particles of food can travel through the gut wall into the lymph. But not just food, also Armour. So Armour can overflow from the digestive tract into the lymph and then into the tissues and the channels of the body. So the lymph becomes, instead of being like a beautiful, clear, nourishing fluid that nourishes all of the tissues of the body in a beautifully effective way and takes away the wastes from the cells and brings them back to be eliminated, it can become polluted, like a polluted river. And the river system just isn't flowing like it should. So the Armour moves into the lymph, makes it heavier, the lymph takes on the qualities of the Armour, it becomes heavy and sticky and glunky. And glunky, I made up another word. And then the Armour can move into the tissues and the channels of the body, into the more subtle areas of the body, and it tends to accumulate either where there are places of movement or there are places of weakness. So if you do think of a river or a creek or something like that, when there are little divots in the creek, you can get little eddies occurring where the water kind of swirls, and then that leads to deposits of soil or silt or something like that. It's the same in our bodies. For example, in the joints and small joints where the energy flows in circles, you tend to get deposits of Armour. And as a result, this is why sometimes when people are starting to suffer from things like arthritis, the first place they experience it is in the toes or in the fingers, because it's those really subtle channels of the body where the Armour can accumulate, and then it can manifest as a disease. So when Armour accumulates in the tissues and the channels, and then when certain elemental aspects become involved with excess elements, there may be excess fire or excess air or excess earth, excess water, they combine with the Armour to create the manifestation of disease. So without Armour in the tissues, there cannot be disease. You might have imbalances in the elements, but disease won't manifest. It's only when there's Armour in the tissues that disease manifests. So in Ayurveda, it is believed that this process of an imbalanced digestive fire, which is often caused by an imbalanced mind, leads to undigested food waste or Armour, which accumulates in the stomach, in the lower intestine, in the duodenum, in the small intestine. It accumulates, it then causes damage, it then overflows, and then it travels, and then it manifests disease in a certain part of the body. This is the root cause of all diseases in Ayurveda, from the common cold all the way through to arthritis, MS, cancer, all of the more serious degenerative diseases that people may experience. The root cause of all of them is an imbalanced digestive fire at a physical level. So Ayurveda is very concerned with maintaining a balanced digestive fire. It's got nothing to do with weight, it's got nothing to do with how we look. It's preventative medicine. It's all about preventing disease. So this is what Ayurveda specializes in. So this Ama stuff sounds pretty gross, right? Do you want to know whether you have it or not? How can you tell? Well, there are some very specific symptoms of Ama which can help you realize whether you have it or not. But I would pretty much guarantee that if you're over the age of 15 and you've been eating a Western diet, there's a pretty high likelihood that you've got some Ama in your system, unless you are blessed with the most amazing constitution in the history of the world and you have just wicked digestion naturally. But check out these things. If in the morning you have a very thick coating on your tongue, it may be a white coating, it may be a slightly discoloured coating, it may be a little bit brown or a little bit yellow or a little bit green. A thick coating on the tongue in the morning is a symptom of Ama in the body. If you suffer from general fatigue, when you've had plenty of sleep and there's really no reason for you to be tired, then that is a symptom of Ama. If you wake up in the morning and you feel like you've had glue like poured into your brain overnight, you feel really heavy and your eyes in particular feel really heavy and you have difficulty concentrating and you don't feel very energetic and you just feel kind of toxic, that is a symptom of Ama. When you don't have any glow to your complexion, you've got kind of a lackluster complexion, or it might even be a bit white or grey or just not thriving, you're just not looking very healthy, that can be a symptom of Ama. All of the states of indigestion described above are a pretty good indicator that there is definitely Ama accumulating in your system because you're not digesting properly. If you have really irregular elimination, so if you don't go to the toilet, you don't eliminate every morning or every evening, you don't have to do both, just once a day. If you're not eliminating at a regular time each day, then that's a good indication that there may be Ama present because that will affect your eliminations. If you have great fluctuations in your energy or your mood or your appetite, that's a symptom of Ama. If you have any pain or stiffness in the joints, and also another thing is if you are inexplicably weak, so if your muscle development looks totally fine and moderate, but then you don't have much strength. So that can be a way that Ayurvedic practitioners test the level of Ama, is they'll get you to squeeze their hand, and if your hand squeeze feels surprisingly weak, considering you've got quite moderate muscular development, then that's a good sign that the power in the body is not translating because there's Ama getting in the way. So that's another indication of Ama. So all of these things, but really the tongue coating is an excellent indication, and it's with all likelihood you probably have Ama accumulating in your system, which is usually not a problem because the digestive fire usually can burn off sort of a small amount of Ama that's accumulating. It can handle it. But if there's a lot of Ama accumulating and the digestive fire is becoming more and more and more imbalanced, that's when we get to the point where the body and the system is kind of overwhelmed with Ama. Now you can imagine as the lymph gets polluted and the tissues of the body aren't being nourished properly and the cells aren't eliminating their waste properly because Ama is affecting all of those sort of flows of nutrition and metabolism, the body can start to look a little bit toxic. We can gain weight and we can gain sort of fat of not a very good quality, and we can sort of see that in our bodies as well. So you can almost see when someone is suffering from a high level of Ama and from an imbalanced digestive fire, because the tissues of the body generally just aren't thriving because they're not being nourished properly. So the nails might be weak and frail, they might be peeling, the hair might not be of a very good quality, the eyes won't be very sparkly, the teeth will start to get a little bit weak and you might be prone to getting cavities. all of the tissues of the body are going to suffer from not being nourished properly, and this will become apparent. And in all likelihood, it's due to poor digestion and poor nourishment of the tissues and accumulating armour. So what do we do about it? We need to cultivate balanced Agni, a balanced digestive fire. And how do we do that? Well, this is where the qualities come in. So from an Ayurvedic perspective, there's this wonderful law of like increases like, whereby if an organism is exposed to certain qualities out there, those same qualities are increased in here. So if we're exposed to certain qualities through our sensory impressions and the food we eat, then those same qualities will be increased in the body-mind. So that means we have some control here. We can choose to expose ourselves to certain qualities and choose not to expose ourselves to other qualities, and we can choose to increase certain qualities in the body-mind that are beneficial and decrease qualities that aren't so good. When it comes to a balanced digestive fire, the qualities of a balanced fire are warm, light, and slightly oily. So just a little bit of oil helps to maintain a balanced flame. We can think of a ghee candle, or even just a beeswax candle, where it's the oiliness in the wax that is just helping to maintain this steady flame. It's the same with us. Warm, light, slightly oily. So these are the qualities that we want to expose ourselves to more in order to balance our digestive fires. Does that make sense? So that's probably enough for today's video. We have learned all of the fundamental aspects of Ayurveda that we really need to understand the next step, which is all the more practical aspects. So in the next video, we'll talk about what does warm, light, and slightly oily really mean in practice. And we'll go into some detail about that. We'll cover the 8 steps of Ayurvedic nutrition that you need to know when you're starting out. I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.